Okay, we're live. Sorry, guys, for a short delay. I'm sure that Dan will explain what happened and what held him back. But before I hand over to him, I'll give him a second to take a deep breath and get settled. And in today's session, it's slightly different than our usual. It's not full-on social media marketing strategies and tactics. It is more in-depth. It goes at looking how to grow and scale your business by learning to think strategically and then execute tactically. So I will hand over to Dan. I will let him explain a little bit more and guide you through this.
Hello, everybody. Can everyone hear me okay? That's my first point.
From what I see on Facebook, it's all good.
Happy days. Right, apologies for being a little bit late. For those of you with young children, you can understand my plight in that my kids are nuts. And yeah, they were just a bit extra special today. So I'm just getting myself sorted out a little bit more than usual. So yeah, apologies for being a bit late. Pancake day and sugar. It's not a good mix. So today we are going to talk about strategy and tactics. And as like I said, it's not your usual workshop. It's not the usual kind of thing you might be used to from the game social media, but it's more my wheelhouse, interestingly, than a lot of the tactical stuff I talk about often on social media topics. Because what we're going to dig into is the real core of entrepreneurship and being business owners in general. And we're going to go from being general to actually getting quite specific into what you actually need to do to take a business from starting through growth, through scale, and then to what I call transitioning. And I'll explain all those three steps as we go. Now, when you really first start digging into this, you need to understand a few very, very key points, right? I've got some notes which I've made as well, so you see me flicking back and forth. That's why. First thing's this. If you entirely base your business upon the selling of time, the vast majority of you don't actually have a business, you have a job. It's just one you made yourself. And I'm going to be throwing a couple of those little nuggets and challenges in throughout this whole stream because, and I don't do it from a position of trying to be a dick, frankly. I do it from a position of I've been there, I've done it, I know how it works, and I've been really looking through various different types of businesses over the years through a very, very specific lens. And the lens that I've always been looking at it through is how do we basically take what's here and put it all the way up there, right? So literally take what's here already and what you need to do to transition that and form that and mold that thing into something that's going to be able to scale and take off. And very few businesses can actually do that. And the first thing you need to understand is that there is a big difference between growth and scale, right? Now, a lot of people, even like really successful entrepreneurs, they will try to shout me down to the ground about the fact that there isn't a difference between growth and scale, but they're wrong because there is. And anyone who says that, feel free to throw them my way and I will correct them. Because when you grow, right, growth is just, in business terms, linear, progressive growth. You know, it's just a straight line on a curve, off you go, and it's just progressive, month by month, steady gains, right? That's just growth, plain and simple. Scale is turning that straight line growth into an exponential curve, right? You cannot be doing the same things to grow a business as you need to be doing to scale a business because they need very different things. And to actually make a business be able to be one that's scalable, you actually need to almost entirely change the products and service that you're offering and the way in which you offer them and the way in which you conduct yourself as a business owner and a leader, because scale is by definition the amplification of doing what you know works and has already been proven. Now, when you go through that transition, it actually takes you from being a doer of the things yourself to more of a leader or CEO type person within your own business. If you're one of those people who are currently working within your business and you're basically selling your time and your expertise, then you're not working necessarily on your business, you're working in your business. And you cannot scale that way, right? And we're going to be digging through all of the different facets and what this means as we go. Now, like I said, difference between growth and scale, linear line, exponential curve, two different things. The mindset you need to shift away from and to is just as big a gap between when you're just starting a business and when you're trying to go into growth. So we're going to go back a step to understand really what this whole transition means. And we're going to be debunking a bunch of myths as well, which I'm going to love because I thoroughly enjoy doing that. So when you start, and for those of you business owners yourself and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, when you start, you're basically an entrepreneur. You're someone who's willing to apply financial risk to building something, right? That's an entrepreneurial spark right there. And when you start a business, it's all about, do I need a business plan? Do I not? Do I need a bank account? Do I not? How do I do this? What is a product? What am I actually going to do? Who's going to buy my thing? Do I sell to friends and family? Do I not? I mean, it's all these things that go through your head. And you basically have to go through the various hurdles to get yourself to a point where you're thinking, yay, I'm off. But that process takes a lot, right? That's the starting phase. That's you getting your head out of, so this 9 to 5 thing I've been doing for years, I don't actually need to do that anymore. Okay. That's interesting. And it's shifting your head into basically being someone who controls your own time, right? And that takes, for many people, quite a significant gap. That's why a lot of people, they think they want to start their own business, but it takes them years to get their head in the right place before they even just pull the switch. And then they start doing the side hustle and they kind of start trying to ease themselves into it. And that in itself is a process. Now, when you get going, right, and you've passed that big hurdle, that's a big hump. Then you get into the growth phase. Now, that's when you start figuring out things like, who's your ideal client? How do you actually sell? How do I create engaging content? What kind of platform am I going to be running on? Do I do all the things? Is Gary Vee right? Can I actually be on all the social platforms and not burn out? Is this person over here right? When actually they say that's a lunch for crap and you can't do that without burning out. And you're kind of trying to figure out all the things that you need to do to start growing. And that in itself, big hump, big hurdle. And when you get to the point where actually you figure out a bunch of that stuff slowly but surely, and then you start growing. So you started growing now. You're getting steady on month by month gains. And there's still people coming at you from this side saying, invest in Facebook ads, we can accelerate all your business. And there's people coming from this side saying, buy my coaching services, and you get LinkedIn leads coming from you every single day. And you get all this stuff coming from different directions, and you're kind of trying to ignore it all. And you still keep on doing your thing, you keep on growing. You made the old investment here and there. Some of it works out, some of it doesn't. But generally speaking, you just keep on plodding along. And then you get to this point, right, this other big ass hump, where you basically run out of time in your day, and you feel like that kind of almost metaphorical hamster just running around on its wheel. And no matter how much more effort you apply, you don't seem to be getting any further ahead than when you were, last week or last month or last year. And you hit that block. It's like right there. I'm going to have to picks up on the microphone. It probably does. But you just hit this block, right? Now, when that happens, that is when you truly get to the point where you basically need to fundamentally shift, not yourself only, but your entire business structure as well. That's when people, even very successful people who you would see out in the world, they go through rebrands and they go through all these different kind of almost step changes. A lot of that isn't actually because they need to do it. It's because they need to feel like they're doing it, because they themselves are going through growth, right? It's funny how a photo shoot or rebrand can actually make an entrepreneur feel like they're stepping into the next phase of them. But actually, it's just them getting their brains into another phase or another way of working. And again, we're going to be jumping into all of this stuff later. So when you go through that next phase, and whether you rebrand, whether you do a bunch of photo shoots, whether you whatever you do to do what you need to do to get your head out of growth and into scale. I'm just being very animated today. When you do that, you will only start to get traction when you understand how scale actually works. And I'll give you a couple of formulas which I use within my own clients. And note this down if you want to, stick it in the comments if you feel the need to share. But when you're growing, all you really need to do is to give some kind of a problem-solving transformation to your audience. You give a solution to a problem, and you charge a fair price for that solution, right? And you just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. That's growth, right? That's it. Whether that's your time, whether that's selling physical products, whatever it is, it's just a solution to a problem with a fair price, rinse and repeat. That would basically give you growth. Now, when you scale, you need to add another component to that. And you need to do a solution to a problem. You need to sell it for a fair price, but then you need to multiply that by some kind of leverage, right? And we're going to be talking a little bit about gambling and financial investment terminology here, but nothing's like too crazy. So I'm not going to go deep into that. So leverage means essentially, and especially in the terms we're talking here, it means the ability for you to sell more or get more for exposing yourself to less risk, right? So in business terms, that basically means being able to sell a product multiple times, even if it's for less profit or with higher costs, therefore giving you less profit, but you can sell much more of them on that exponential curve of a scale to give yourself scale, right? This is why people go into things like digital courses, digital products, box shipping, all that kind of thing, because you outsource to a third party the production of content, for example, or you create a digital product which you can then sell multiple times. That is a leverage, right? But when you need to do that, you need to be very, very crystal clear that what you're actually creating as a product is scalable and it doesn't have any pitfalls, let's say. Because here's the rub with this, right? If you are, say, investing in a product that you're going to be drop shipping, or if you're investing time and effort and marketing capital in creating a digital course, just as two examples, to scale, you're then going to be amplifying all of the marketing efforts, whether it's influencer marketing, paid spend, advertising, Facebook ads, Google ads, whatever. You're going to be amplifying the sales and marketing inputs into selling that thing. And the very nature of amplifying that sales and marketing process actually amplifies all of the good, but it also amplifies all of the bad, right? So if your product is, say you've got a 10% conversion rate, when you start amplifying that to new markets and new audiences, that 10% conversion rate might drop to, say, 5% or 6% or 7%. And the reverse of the scale you're going to be receiving in terms of income is also the same as what you'll experience in terms of your costs. Because the way that something like Facebook works is that, say, if you start spending $100 a week on advertising for your product and you get, say, 10 sales, if you spend $200 the following week, you're not going to get 20, you're going to get probably 15, right? Because Facebook knows, and it's not stupid, that it needs to almost hold back some of the goodness to make you spend more with them. Same goes in terms of your team. You may hire 5 people. 3 of them will be absolute rock stars. 2 of them, kind of take it or leave it. So you also get a reduction in productivity the more people you hire, because you're never going to get it completely right. So this whole scale thing, and I hope this is all making sense, and stick a comment in the comments if it's not. This whole thing, you need to, yes, create a product that's leverageable, and yes, you need to market it in an accelerated way to get more sales in. Your exposure is going to be higher, your risk is going to be higher, your conversion rates are going to drop, but when you do it right, the sales increase that you're making will offset and some the decrease in efficiency or effectiveness of the costs associated to it, right? Difference between growth and scale. So if you want to create a scalable business, you need to understand those things. Now, I mentioned earlier that we're going to be getting into some terminology in terms of gambling here. There's an actual thing in both gambling and even trading, like high risk trading, things like Bitcoin and currencies, FX, that kind of stuff, where it's like revenge gambling or revenge trading, and it's very much a mindset thing. So and I've seen this with startup founders, with team members, with executives, corporate boards, you name it. I've worked with all of them, and they all suffer from this. So what happens is that, say for instance, like I mentioned, you've got 5 team members, 3 of them rock stars, 2 of them bit meh, right? Now, what happens is that the frustration that you feel, like deep within your soul almost, at the people who aren't pulling their weight, or the product that's not selling, or the advertising channel that's not delivering as you expected it to, or as you were promised that it would. Revenge trading is such that you either gun for the people who are in control of those things as if it's their fault, when most of the time it's not. Often it's actually yours for going down that route in the first place. Or you say if you spent $100 on Facebook ads, or $1,000 on Facebook ads, or $5,000, whatever, and it didn't work, and you thought it would work, and you knew it would work, but it didn't. Then you'd go and then revenge spend. You'd be like, I know this is going to work, and you spend more money on it, and then more money on it, and then more money on it. But you don't go to the root cause, which is probably the fact that what you're doing on that platform and how, or what you're trying to do with the team member and how you're trying to lead them, that in is itself the thing that is the problem. And it takes a lot of self-control and self-conscious behavior and belief to actually understand that you yourself are the problem. And this is why a lot of business owners, they fail at this point, because they struggle to make that shift and that switch from being the doer of the things to letting go, and then focus purely on making a small number of very, very high quality decisions, which is essentially what your position will be when you get to that point, right? Now, as we're going through this, the thing that I see a lot of people do, and I say this with enough love in my heart that I can, many business owners out there are not actually able, or they're not built for managing a business and leading a business that is scaling. And the reason for that is this. When I said about how everything gets amplified, everything does get amplified, like everything. Your stress levels get amplified, your successes get amplified, your profits get amplified, but also the hate that you will get will also get amplified, both from externally and from within your own organization. Okay. And I'll share with you a little thing that I had to go through myself, where probably the biggest business and fastest growing business that I ever worked in was a hosting business. And on the outside, it was a highly growing business, very successful, loads of mergers and acquisitions and consolidations and all sorts of stuff. There was a ton of it, and it was really, really fast moving. And it was a lot of fun in many ways. But it was also, on the board level, which is where I sat, it was, and I mean this absolutely, like 100%, it was the most savage, backstabbing, almost toxic and poisonous environment I have ever worked in my life. And I genuinely mean, and I say this with all truth as well, I went through a year of therapy after I left that business, just to unpick the web of crap from my head. I spent every single waking hour whilst I was in the office waiting and expecting knives in the back or in the chest, depending how brazen someone felt at the time. That is what high scale, high growth looks like when you're on that level. And that was like 9-figure turnover, exit valuation businesses. We're talking like hundreds of millions of pounds here, not even dollars, pounds. When the risks are that high, it gets nasty. So if you think that even the hint of that isn't where you want to be, a scalable business, if you're looking for an 8 or 9 figure, if that's your aspiration, and some of you may be, some of you may not, it might not be for you. And it might be for you much, much more healthy to go with a growth business for a long period of time and get to that point slower, be smart with your investing and with the way in which you manage your finances. You can still get to an 8 or 9 figure sum over a 10, 20 year period as you can do in a 4 or 5 year period. And it'll be healthier for you. Okay. So there's a couple of truth bombs on that one. So I'm just going to check the comments here because I haven't actually been looking at them. Right, so there's a whole bunch of comments.
There's lots of comments. It's interesting because I know that your sessions, especially for me, are more like
they get deep
silence and be like writing things down, getting my head exploding, listening, letting it sink in, listening to it again and be like, oh, this is what he meant, this is what you do. So
it takes a while.
A lot of people will be there just like, what now?
Yeah, you will need to check the replay on this one a couple of times because, I mean, the stuff I'm talking to you about, in many cases, that's actually taken me years to actually kind of get my head around. And the next bit we're going to go through is the steps about how to actually kind of go from start to growth into scale. And I'll explain how that works. But is there anything here blindingly obvious?
There's one question, kind of a basic introductory question from Eva, asking how should sole trader approach creating a business strategy? Is it the one thing at a time plan or trying to cover all the strategic points straight from the beginning?
I'll actually get to that when I'm going to go through everything. So I'm absolutely going to cover that one because it's basically where I start. So yes.
Good.
What's the next one? Ooh. Network marketing, helping us become successful at avoiding start costs. And
the one you're reading is this one from Margaret. Yeah. She works in network marketing and has long career in corporate and then moving into network marketing as her business afterwards.
Right. Okay. Funny actually talking about websites. You don't need a website at all. You just don't. I mean, I've got 4, but that's because I'm me and I like doodling with stuff like that. But I don't need any. You really don't. Okay. So let's dig into the how. Right. So we're going to get like nitty gritty fun stuff. And Lenka disappears. She's like there with her notebook doing this. So I'm going to go through, I mean, this is actually what I go through in my own academy as well with my consultancy clients. So I'm going to go through that at a fairly top level because I haven't got like 3 months to do it like on this one call. But what we'll go through is the steps that I take startup businesses and solopreneurs and consultancies and service providers through the whole flow. And there's lots of tools that I use to do this, which we're not going to have time to do today. That's a whole thing. But we're going to cover all the basics, okay? And answering that question as well that Lenka just shared. So I go through what I refer to in my world as the best formula for growth. And I call it best because it basically spells like BEST, because I'm really simple like that. So the first one is the B, which is I refer to as the business of you, right? So this is, it's a fairly deep one, but I'm not going to go to it too deep. This is very much self-exploration for you. Now, when you're going through the business journey, it varies according to market, and it varies according to niche. But in general, the majority of businesses, in the region of about 80% of businesses that actually start, fail before their 5th year of trading, right? Now, of those, 70% of those, and again, it varies according to market and niche, but not by much, 70% of those that fail would actually fail by year 3 or before year 3. And 70% of those, funny how it's always like 70 and 80% marks, 70% of those that actually manage to survive between year 3 and year 5, the vast majority of them, 70% of which, they only manage to do so by taking on personal debt to keep the thing alive, right? And that's in terms of credit cards, it's in terms of, personal loans, remortgages of homes in some cases, which I think is personally like batshit fucking crazy. Someone's remortgaging their house to keep their business running that's not even profitable, but people do it because they're that invested. They can't let go. Like I said, it's the mindset shift. But for those people who take on personal debt to keep the thing running, even though it's not successful, and there's another 7, which is really weird when you look at the numbers, but it is another 7 because I've checked. 7 years is how long it takes those people on average to pay that debt back, right? So when I talk about the B, i.e. the business of you, which is what I refer to as, it's really being incredibly clear in your brain that what you are doing, you are going to stick to for at least 3 to 5 years, at least. And it's an investment in you just as much as it is an investment in your business and within serving your audience. Because if you are not willing to explore on a deep level your views and your opinions on what you believe in and what you don't believe in, what you'll fight for, what you won't fight for, what you believe you really want to work within your clients and what you don't, right? Even down to the point of your own ethics, and our ethics is a big thing that I spend a lot of time covering with my own clients. The ethics within which or with which you will conduct yourself within your business and externally to your business, your brand, your leadership style, all of that. When I talk about the business of you, you are essentially setting up the foundation of your mindset and your intent within which you're going to be doing this thing. All right. If you're not clear on that, then the chances and likelihood that you're going to be among the 80% of people who fail before year 3 to 5 is massively, massively higher. Right. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to be very, very, very clear on how and what you want to do in growing this business and how and why you're going to be really sticking to it, right? Because again, like I said before, if you get to the point of scale, everything you've done in the past doesn't, every tweet you see with MPs all the time, they're stupid for those people who put stuff on Twitter and think it's just going to go away, because it doesn't. As you scale and as your exposure gets amplified, and the more you remain online and the greater you build your authority within your market and the status within your eyes of the audience, the bigger that all becomes. There are people who will go back through every single post, every single tweet, every single video you've ever done to find something to then use against you years down the line. And if there are incongruencies between who you were and who you now try to be, and if those aren't congruent together, then people aren't going to trust you. And if they don't trust you, they don't buy from you. And that's bad, right? And it takes a lot to unpick and then change the perception once you've already laid it down in stone. So it's far, far better, far, far easier to figure all that shit out now rather than then, right? And we'll talk about ethics in a bit as well, because that's another important thing. Now, when you've figured out the business of you then have to figure out why someone's going to earn, or sorry, why you deserve to earn someone's trust, right? Now, the E is earning trust. So earning trust is all about brand and it's all about message. And again, far, far too much to go through now, but when you want to be going from growth into scale, amplification makes this even more critical. So again, good to get it sorted out now, but it's actually more important for branding for you than it actually is your audience. And some people think, what do you mean branding is more important for me than it's my audience? And I actually mean that, it is. So I actually called my business Authority and Status. And I went through a bunch of different iterations of my own business names, all doing similar things into the same kind of audience, the same kind of transformation. But I was always diluting the name. You know, like, what should I call it? What do I do? What's the thing that I'm delivering? And I actually called mine Authority and Status because every time I spoke to people, they were like, you know, I was talking about authority in your market and status within your eyes of the audience, and, you know, having authority within your market and feeling that you've got the authority yourself and believing in yourself that you are the authority and so on. And I realized that actually for me, I had a bit of imposter syndrome back in the day. And I say back in the day, it's probably like, I don't even know how many years ago there was now. A few years ago, to be fair. I had more hair at that point. But I had quite a bit of imposter syndrome, right? So I actually called my business fairly recently, probably last year, year before. I changed it and I called it Authority and Status. Not because that's what my audience resonates with, and they do to a degree. It's actually therapy for me. So every time I see it, I'm like, yes, imposter syndrome, get to feck. And it's all about me. So when I look at my brand, when I'm speaking to potential clients, when I'm selling, and when I'm creating content, people actually connect with me as a human. Again, we'll get to that in a minute. But people connect to me as a human. They buy from me as a human. But my brand, you know, the business brand, the one that I'm going to be scaling, not the personal brand, because they're two for me, but the business brand is all about personal therapy for me and basically kicking imposter syndrome in the face. You know, so when I work with clients, I have the confidence to talk about what I talk about, like I am now, confidently. And if anyone wants to try and shout me down, feel free, rock on, because you're going to fail, because I'm that confident about what I'm doing. And I can earn trust in an audience, as I hope I'm doing even now, by delivering what I'm delivering with confidence and intent and passion, and hopefully an element of love as well. So that's how I earn trust within the eyes of my audience. So earning trust is the next step. We haven't even got to business tactics here, right? Notice how we're not even talking about, you know, how to grow your business using Facebook ads, or how to, you know, get 10,000 followers on Instagram so you can get the swipe up feature, which they may be doing away with soon or not, who knows. I haven't even got to that point yet. That's all tactics. We'll talk about strategy and tactics next. So we've gone through the business of you, earning trust and why the fuck you should deserve it in the first place. And trust, massively important thing. People, they need to know you, they need to like you, yes, but if they trust you before they know you and like you, then actually you already won. So trust trumps all of the others, right? So if you get trust first, and that's all you aim for and that's all you get, you've already succeeded, right? People who talk about know, like, and trust, yes, they're right. Yes, I believe know, like, and trust is a very important thing. It's also ineffective and inefficient because it comes from corporate world where bureaucracy basically is the name of the game. And knowing and liking doesn't then lead to trust. Trust can come first, right? Think of it from every single time you've ever bought anything that a friend's recommended. You don't even know, sorry, you didn't even know that the thing existed before your friend recommended it. You trust your friend. There you go. done. It's why people front load their programs with like a metric shit ton of testimonials, because they're trying to get trust first. They're trying to leverage trust beyond anything else. Again, talk about ethics of that in a minute. So the business of you earning trust and why you should deserve it. Now, the S is setting your stage. Okay. Now, like I said, when you amplify your message, it's very, very, very difficult to amplify a message that is split in multiple directions. I haven't actually got the graphic here. It's probably the only slide that I would share through this entire talk. It's the only one I don't have. But you can Google it. Just Google lines of communication and you'll see what I mean. And many of you who know me already have seen me talk about this before. Basically, when you are dividing your time and dividing your attention, whether you're talking about communicating with different people and a different number of people, or whether you're talking about multiple products or multiple services, and this gets to the question that was asked earlier about, how you should start and what products you should sell. The wider you disperse your attention and your effort and your energies, the harder it is to grow and the more complicated it becomes to try and scale. So every single business I've ever worked in that I have been given the responsibility to scale, from nothing to, all the way up to 9-figure exits, every single one of them, without exception, I have done so by laying people off, shutting down teams, closing offices, and reducing the number of products and services and brands within the organization. Every single one of them. Yes, I have been that person that's basically the hatchet. And no, I didn't feel good about it, but it is what it is. I think one person actually, I had to let go, sadly, quite a number of people in an office in northern Utah, which is basically about as Mormon as you can possibly get. And no one fires anyone in Mormon communities because it's not what you do. I did quite a lot of them all at once. I'm pretty sure to this day, my name is pretty much mud on the local football field, but it needs to be done. And the comment I had from one of them was, coming into the office used to be like coming into the clubhouse, I think they referred to it as, but that's not been the same since you came in on the scene. And I'm like, coming into the office should not feel like going to the clubhouse with your mates and playing pool. It's like, it kind of like spelled out the point that I was doing it for. Anyway, I digress. So when you set your stage, it's all about being as efficient and effective as you possibly can. And I'm not talking repurposing all your content on every single platform either. It's not even about that. It's picking, well, especially when you're starting out, one product, right? Just one. So one product that you're going to talk about, and your stage talks about that one product. And your stage consists, at the very bare minimum, of one long form platform, content platform, and just double down on that. So whether that's, Facebook, whether that's YouTube, whether that's, LinkedIn Lives, whatever that long form content is, just focus on one long form content platform, right? And that's it. Everything else doesn't exist. Just put it out of your brain. One long form piece of content, one long form platform. When you got that down and you feel confident with that, and you can do that consistently, because consistency is a thing, then you add one short form platform. Long form becomes educational, short form becomes communicative with your audience, and it's an engagement platform. So it may be YouTube and Instagram, or it may be Facebook Lives and Twitter, or it may be Pinterest and whatever the other short form platforms are. Some people double down purely on stories. Some people just do TikToks. Some people just do short form video on LinkedIn as an engagement mechanism, and they do YouTube videos on YouTube as their main long form content platform. Whatever it is, long form, short form, that's all you need to do. When you have got significant growth and you've got revenue to spend and you want to step into scale, then you can start looking at other platforms and bringing them in, as you can be consistent with those two. But if you try to do too much, you'll fail. You'll get burned out and it'll become very, very, very overbearing. In answer to the question about the product, one product, literally one product, whether that's one gateway product that then goes to other kind of similar products, that's a different thing. You can do that, but you only sell one entry-level product, one step. So if you go into a bar or coffee house or a conference where we can do those again, and someone says, so what do you do? And you can say, well, I do blah, 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 and I help blah, blah, blah people to achieve whatever transformation. And, if you want to get started with that, or you want to try out my services, if you want to jump into this free thing, there you go. That's the thing. And when you say that enough, all of your audience then talks about you, and it says, oh, well, that person's blah, 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 who helps blah, blah, blah audience and achieve this transformation. And if you want to get started with them, join that, or download this, or buy their $20 thing. Whatever it is, they become your audience. It becomes very easy to get leads that way. If you're sending 5 different things, no one's going to remember 5 different things that they're going to recommend to their friends and family. They will remember 1, not 5. All right? I'm just checking comments here. How do you avoid? Ooh, I love those questions. We'll get to that in a minute. I won't tell you which one I'm looking at. So then when we get to the T, right? So the T is what I refer to as transform with love. And this is where we're going to talk about ethics. Okay. Now, I may get on my soapbox. If I do, Lenka, you have my entire permission to come on the video and slap me down. But when you talk about ethics, scale, and we're going to be debunking some myths here as well, scale, everything that you do to sell, it will carry with it an element of your intent, right? And you'll see this if you ever look at anyone's Facebook ads that they're running. I almost guarantee you every single Facebook ad that's run by pretty much every single influencer you've ever seen or brand, they will have exponentially more negative comments on them than any organic content you will ever see, right? Because what they're doing is they are taking essentially what has worked on their organic audiences and amplifying it to new warm or cold audiences to try and nurture them to buy their thing. And if they get that wrong, and if it feels a little bit icky, or worse, if that person's brand or if that business's brand has negativity around it in certain pockets of their market, then they are going to get exponentially more hate and negativity from the content they put out. It's just how it works. So when you transform with love, which is what I teach my clients to do, it is almost I describe it sometimes in different ways, but it's almost a stop, like a hard stop of you really considering what you're doing and how you're doing it. And if you're doing it from a place of love, which is irrefutably a good thing, then great. If it's not done from necessarily a place of love, and if you wouldn't like that thing done to you, then should you be doing it? Right. And I'll talk about some of the strategies that I've seen out there, just so you see what I mean. Now, there were a lot of people who did virtual summits as an example, right? Earlier on last year, virtual summits became a big thing. Some of them very ethically, some of them, even brands that you may know, they did them in a way that I was quite surprised, because I was like, you're going to give me what now? And I spoke on some of these summits, not realizing that what was in the T's and C's, I should, in hindsight, have actually looked at it deeper. So I spoke on these summits, and then all of a sudden my inbox just started getting bombarded by loads of sales emails and sequences from all of the other speakers. I'm thinking, what was going on here? What? And what happened was that the people who were signing up to the summit and not reading the T's and C's were actually signing up on their contact details being given to every single speaker to then try and pitch after a certain period of time. And ethically, to me, I'm like, so you're basically spamming in the small print every single person who signs up to your event. Okay. I'm not loving that. And like I said, I mean, not many people did it, but there were a few brands out there, just a few, who did. And I was like, ethically, I'm not loving that. That's not me. And I refused to speak on any more of those events. Didn't do it anymore, because that didn't sit right with me or my brand or my ethics and how I wanted to portray my business and my personal brand and my business brand to the world. When you look at things like 5-day challenges as an example, and there are some people out there who have very, very, very passionate audiences, who will literally go to bat for them. The way in which they actually run their 5-day challenges, again, there's many ways of doing these different launches, but how you run yours determines who you are and how you're portrayed as a brand to the world, right? So when you're running these 5-day challenges, if your challenge is very much, day 1 do this, day 2 do this, day 3 do this, day 5 do this, day 4 and day 5, and then on day 4.5, maybe 5, you say out saying, if you want to work with me more, then you can, buy my thing, invest in my course, join my program, whatever. That's happy days. You are building a relationship through a challenge, delivering value, nurturing and converting. Happy days, do that all day long. Off you go, rock and roll. But there are a great many out there who intentionally use psychological manipulation and hard sell tactics to pressurize you into feeling like you need to buy the thing. So some of those challenges, and I won't go through all the different tactics here, but some of those challenges might be the case of you start on day 1 and they say, it's all easy, nothing bad here. We're not going to overwhelm you with anything, all very, very simple steps. Day 1, just do this tiny, tiny little easy thing. And you're like, cool. Day 2 is again, getting a little bit harder now. We're going to do this other tiny, tiny little thing, but it's all nice and easy. Don't worry about it. If you get a bit overwhelmed later on in the week, then we'll set up some calls and we'll help you out. And then day 3, it's right, this other little tiny thing, this is your next step, go and do it. But the complexity of this tiny little thing is actually way up here. It's through the roof, right? So the people who are quite new to marketing worlds and to entrepreneurship in general will be easy step. Oh my God, I'm useless. And then day 4, even more complicated. It's oh my God, I'm totally useless. And then on the evening of day 3, the person organizing would have said, some of you have felt a bit overwhelmed here. It's okay. Don't worry. We've got your back. We're going to set up a bunch of calls on day 4 to help you out. And a bunch of people will get on calls and they'll then use the testimonials to try and upsell more people into their programs. And then they say on day 5, so many people got overwhelmed that actually we're going to run even more calls on day 5 to help you out. And actually the whole thing, all of those calls, everyone who joins the call then gets a follow-up call with a consultant or a coach to help them one step further, which is essentially a veiled sales pitch, right? So then you end up getting to the end of the challenge and you have how many hundreds of signups at the end of the challenge, many of which the organizer will claim is a 6-figure launch or a 7-figure launch or whatever it is, regardless of the fact that they've spent 5, 6 or 7 figures on actual Facebook ads to get people in there in the first place. And regardless of the fact that it's got about 30 to 60% cancellation rate once people realize that actually they didn't want the thing in the first place, they got pressured into it. But if you do that enough, you make yourself a 7-figure business, and you do genuinely. But you do it off the back of thousands of people that you are basically pressurizing into buying what they don't want and don't need. So there's just one example. Ethically speaking, if you looked at that whole thing I've just explained through the lens of transforming with love, is that something that you would want to be done to you or those closest to you? And if the answer is yes, frankly, you're a bit of a psychopathic bitch or dick, and I don't really want to know you. If, however, you look at that and you think, no, that's not the right thing to do, then the lens of transforming with love tells you that you shouldn't do it. No matter who it is that's telling you to do it, no matter how successful they are, avoid it like the plague, right? And do business your way. And again, to go back to scale, everything that you will do through the growth phase will get amplified in the scale stage. So if you've trodden on people, manipulated people, downtrodden people, whatever you've done to get to that point, then what you'll find a lot of the successful people do is they spend most of their time actually in legal conversations and in HR dealing with the aftermath of what they've actually done previously or potentially what they continue to do. And they will sue people into bankruptcy to keep that quiet. And that doesn't really last very long. And eventually it comes out, as you have seen in many people over the years, I'm sure. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about when you look at some people and you think, oh, so that's what happened to that person. Then for quiet now, they go quiet because eventually they've got to hide or just stop doing what they're doing. All right. So there's my little rant over. Now we're going to talk a little bit about tactics, right? And really we're going to drill through the crux of what you need to do to grow and scale. And it's not what you think. People talk about business plans, they talk about strategies, they talk about tactics and frameworks and methods to follow. All of it, and I genuinely mean all of it, minus mine, even mine to a degree, you don't need it unless you need it. And you only know that you need it if you have done what I'm about to say and you're still struggling. Because again, here's the thing. Businesses tend to exist in worlds where businesses are selling to other businesses and buying from other businesses, and they have to get themselves into the mindset of customers and end users and humans as a secondary thought process. And when you look at it from the lens of actually you're just one human selling to another human, humans aren't complicated, right? So if you look at books written by, on storytelling, for example, often you may think Donald Miller, who wrote a book called Story Brand. If you're thinking about entrepreneurship journeys, you might think about someone like Daniel Priestley. Again, two very successful guys. They're selling products in terms of information, and their products that they sell in terms of information, i.e. their books, are actually sales tools to get people into their programs. Their programs are sales tools to get you into their retreats or their masterminds and so on. Right? So it's just business at the end of the day. And I don't know Donald Miller that well. I've met Daniel Priestley before. Genuinely nice guy, right? So that's great. Someone like Russell Brunson, on the flip side, I'm personally not a massive fan because a lot of what he sells is actually some of the manipulative techniques that I've been explaining. And he doesn't mesh with me. Many people do mesh with him. I don't. But when you're looking at Russell Brunson, when you're looking at Donald Miller, at Daniel Priestley, pretty much any author out there, they sell their frameworks. And many of you may even sell your own frameworks with a lot of this stuff. But actually what you're selling is just a diluted, reframed version of what someone else has already done. And when you go through, way back through the ages, the source of pretty much every method of how to tell a story or how to engage with another human or how to sell or how to pitch a product or how to deliver with empathy or with love, like we were talking about before, pretty much every single one of them, framework or otherwise, they originate themselves in the works of people like Plato and Aristotle. And, we're talking centuries old stuff here. And they got it from theologians and they got it through Egyptians and Mayans. We've been doing storytelling for millennia and it hasn't changed. You can see the hieroglyphs on walls in the Great Pyramids that will tell you how to tell a story. It's not new. And what eventually you'll realize is that actually you don't need necessarily, if you could do it yourself, rock on. If you can't, that's when you come and talk to people like me or like, Donald Miller or Daniel Priestley, whoever you mesh with at the time and whoever you feel like you can work with. That's the thing that you need to focus on. The information is the same. It might be framed in a different way, called a different thing, but it's the same. And eventually it comes down to telling a story and being able to engage with another human and to be able to solve their problems. That's it. There is literally nothing more complicated to running a business than that. if you figure out what story is resonating with the audience and how you're going to be solving the audience's biggest problem, i.e. the transformation you're going to give them, and Aristotle spoke about transformation and solving problems like way back when. It's not new. When you figure out how to engage someone with the story, to then make them trust you and to believe that you can help them, and when you transform with an element of love and empathy from where they are to where they want to be, when you can do that, you can charge a fair price for your service, right? Period. Done. Easy. We, however, tend to overcomplicate things by throwing in all these buzzwords and strategies and frameworks and tactics. Most of them aren't even strategies. They're not even frameworks. They're not even tactics. They're basically process flows and how-tos and step-by-steps. It's basically dot to dot of how to do shit in business. That's pretty much what most of what you'll see, most of the noise you'll see out in the world is. Another little mini rant. But when you see someone talking about their strategy for gaining 1,000 followers on Instagram, for example, it's not a strategy at all. It's a framework. It's a process. It's step by step. It's a dot to dot picture where one goes to 2 and 2 goes to 3, and suddenly I've got a dinosaur. Yay! It's not a strategy at all. It just sounds better by calling it a strategy. A strategy, by definition, is a broad roadmap to achieving an outcome. It's a broad direction to the thing. A tactic is a process or a method by which to achieve a goal. So if you're seeing someone say, here's my strategy and my framework and my mastermind, whatever they call it, for getting your first 1,000 followers on Instagram or getting to your first 1,000 subscribers on YouTube or whatever, vanity metrics aside and my own issues that kind of putting to the side for a second, when you see people saying those as strategies, they're not. They're dot to dot puzzles where they're just sending you a process from going point A to point B. Now, the thing that means the difference between charging high ticket for that and low ticket for that, i.e. high revenue, low revenue, isn't how good their knowledge is. It's not how effective their framework has been in the past. It's nothing about that. Because, if you look at Instagram, like Alex Tooby, for example, Tooby, I can't remember how you pronounce her name. She talks a lot with some brands about how to grow on Instagram. Elise Dharma talks a lot with other brands about how to grow on Instagram. A friend of mine, Sam Barefoot, talks about how to grow on Instagram. They all teach the same stuff. It's the same. It's no different. Instagram doesn't change. Methods of using it aren't that different. The only difference is how you connect with that person on a personal human level, on an emotional deep level, right? And when you really look into it and when you take that on board, and again, we're talking about strategy and scale here, when you realize that actually, if you can tell a story, and stories don't change, I'll talk about stories in a sec as well, when you can tell a story and when you can achieve a transformation and when you can do that for a fair price, then when you can do that as a human, actually it really just comes down to how charismatic you can be and how charismatic you are in engaging with your audience. And when you understand that, then actually and this is a bit of an aha moment many people have whenever I talk about this, when you actually believe that the reason you buy the thing you buy isn't because you want the thing, even many times, because often you can just do it yourself. What you're buying is the charismatic connection with the person that you're buying into, and you're buying how that makes you feel, right? Now, like I said, when you realize that, and I actually put a post in another group just yesterday where I asked a very similar question to this. And it was interesting to see some of the feedback, because if you read between the lines, most people bought high ticket programs, as an example, who then felt robbed because the program didn't achieve the outcome they wanted. But when you ask them why they bought the thing in the first place, it wasn't about the program at all. It's because They liked the person, they trusted the person, seemed to have the lifestyle that they wanted for themselves. The person made them feel good. The person, complimented them a lot, or made them feel that they could achieve what they really wanted to achieve. And it's the first person who felt that they felt that could actually support them on that journey. It's that kind of stuff. It's lots of feelings. It wasn't the actual thing that they were buying. And when they realized that actually that wasn't necessarily the case, and actually they just spent a lot of money on something that isn't delivering, then they felt embarrassed, ashamed. They felt angry because of it, because they felt like they were let down. But the question is, were they let down because the person manipulated them into that sale? In some cases, maybe. In some cases, probably not. Could they have qualified the people joining the programs to a higher degree? Maybe. Is it their job to necessarily take responsibility for everyone else's decisions? Probably not. And that is in itself a mindset shift, because the people who are still holding anger in that are not ready to grow and scale. The people who took that on board and said, it was a learning curve, I'm never going to do it again, but it was money I spent to help me develop as a person, those people are ready to scale. Those people are ready to step outside themselves and to look at their actions and their behaviors and take responsibility for it and to step forward. Which goes back all the way to what I was saying at the beginning, where if you don't feel you can do that, whether right now or ever, scale probably isn't for you. And that's not a bad thing. That's you being sensible and picking your lane and picking your direction and picking the method by which you want to travel. That's just you taking the bus or the train. It's you being smart. It's not a bad thing. It's a weird analogy, I know. But like I said, it all comes down to, and this is the thing, when you want to go from growth into scale, really the only thing holding you back from doing that is you. And again, I say this with as much love as I can. If you are focusing on tactics, if you're focusing on the how, if you're focusing on the why, if you're focusing on the where, my almost common question with every single person who comes to me with those, and if you're still in that position, by the way, just feel free, come to me and we'll have a conversation about it and we can just unpick the why, and I'll be happy to do that with anyone listening. But when you really focus down on what you need to do, almost everyone on this call doesn't need to focus on strategies. They don't need to focus on the tactics. They need to focus on story, connection, and mindset. And that's it. You have the free tools available to you to do everything else. You can do programs on Facebook. You can do lives through StreamYard like we are right now. You can do a Stripe payment. You can pay via PayPal if you take the charges, because I hate those. But it's not hard. You can do a very, very simple thing. Set up a private Facebook group, charge $5,000 a pop if you wanted to. If that's fair trade for the transformation you're providing. And if you connect on someone on a human level and you can transform that person from where they are to where they want to be with the love that they deserve, then rock on. You don't need to be complicated. But if you are putting lots of blockers in your way, then often, again, I say this with love, often those blocks are being put in your way by you, not by what you're trying to achieve. And there's a bombshell for you. I should check other comments because I realize we're going past the hour a little bit. Someone says, do I recommend following other business models? The only business model I recommend you should follow is the business model that you make for yourself. Screw anyone else. And I genuinely mean that. You'll find that when you've got people who are selling you courses or business models or plans or frameworks or books or whatever, basically pick the one that you resonate with the most, or you feel you can follow the most, or that speaks the most to who you are and the kind of business you want to build for yourself, right? And that's the only thing that matters. Because what you'll find is that again, a big proportion of the people who buy into other business models or plans or frameworks or courses or masterminds or whatever, a big portion of them don't actually end up following through, not because they don't work, because for the small portion they do, but they work for the people that resonate with them the most, and they don't work for the people that they don't resonate with. So if you're not sure, my advice would be, don't buy it, don't spend time on it, and don't spend energy or effort on it. My advice would be, go through a similar kind of process that I've just explained. Rewatch this video as well. Figure out what the business of you is. Figure out why people should trust you. Figure out what the stage is that you want to be speaking your message from, and then how you're going to transform with love the solution that you're going to be delivering. That is your business plan. Right? No one who I work with, their business plans, none of them look the same. Like none of them. Because I specifically work with clients the way I do, because it builds the business model or plan, whatever you want to call it, framework. People call it whatever they want to call it that means the most to them. And they actually mean, some people give them names. I've got one client who calls his Bob because he's weird. But you just give it whatever name you want. You build the business plan of you, because it's one that you are going to follow for 3 to 5 years and beyond. Anything else, ignore it. If it doesn't make sense to you, don't worry, build your own. Again, it's not hard, it's not complicated. It's everything we've been talking about today. Yeah, most things are recycled using trendy buzzwords. I'm actually going to tell you something completely. This might help you in understanding some of the stuff that I've gone through in previous businesses. Like I said, I used to work in hosting. So one of the biggest competitors in the hosting market to pretty much every hosting company that's not them is GoDaddy. So when you don't need to understand the terminology here that I'm going to go through, but when I was actually working in hosting world, you had shared hosting, virtual private servers, virtual servers, private clouds, and dedicated servers. Right, and then you had high performance dedicated servers, and all of those are very, very different products. You have different platforms, different services. You have to migrate from one to the other, to the other, to the other. They're physically separate things, and that's the hosting world. I mean, many hosting companies are even the same today. Now, GoDaddy, however, they fronted exactly what I'm talking about here. They go to the market and just sell domain names. The one cheapest, lowest barrier to entry, easy purchasable thing that's the gateway to everything else. Email, hosting, website, landing pages, you name it, that's a domain name, right? So they figured out what the smallest point of entry would be, and the least exposure, the least risk, the thing that's sticky because you have to register for a minimum of a year, up to 10 years in some cases. So it's sticky as well. And then they sold shared hosting, VPS servers, cloud to house servers, dedicated cloud servers, dedicated servers, high performance cloud clusters, and so on. They sold exactly the same products, except when you look through the terms and conditions and you've looked through the spec of those platforms, actually what they were selling was one cloud server platform that they just divided up in 1,000 different ways, right? Everyone else in the market was like, well, hang about, you can't sell a shared service here and then give that shared service a few more resources and call it the thing over there. That's not the same thing. GoDaddy were like, we're not saying it is. Look, it's in the small print underneath the picture. But because their audience weren't as techie as most of the hosting providers were, their audience was like, well, GoDaddy's a third of the price of everyone else. I'm just going to go with them. Their support was great, and they invested a lot of time in their support. Their support was also actually their sales function, because they upselled people in the first interactions of support, which has actually got GoDaddy to where they are today. So they almost faked their way to scale, because they realized that people don't actually care about the physically separate products or services. People just cared about the outcome. The entire rest of the hosting market cared more about the separate specific products and services than their customers did. And they didn't realize that. GoDaddy left them all literally in their dust and in their wake. And now GoDaddy are a multiple billion-dollar business. Exactly what I've been talking about today. When you focus on the humans and what they actually want to achieve, the transformation they're after, fair trade, off you go. That's all you need to focus on. And if you are like the hosting company that I was working with, and at the time, years ago this was, and every other hosting business in the market as well, you can get disrupted very easily if people like you follow what I'm talking about. There's one from Alex here as well. Would you agree that there needs to be more focus on finding the right questions? Actually, Alex, what I would say is that people come to you for help with transformation, and they stay for either community, which is one thing. So if you're a service provider and not a commodity business without a community, then you're missing a trick, because people will come to you for the transformation that they're after, and then they'll basically leave. They'll stay for the relationship, i.e. the community, i.e. the physical community embodiment of the charisma within which you have bestowed upon the brand. So, I mean, like, as Lenka's done, Cambridge Social Media is a big group of like-minded, nice people, right? She's done a fantastic job of building that community, because they're all kind of similar. They're all kind of very much in the same world. They're having the same struggles. They go through the same pitfalls, the same challenges. There's camaraderie there. But you'll find that actually the culture of that community is representative of the founders of the community itself. And there's a guy called Ben Horowitz, who is one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz, which is probably one of the most influential venture capitalist firms in Silicon Valley. And he defines culture as the cumulative nature of all those within an organization. So when you build a business that has a community element on it, that community needs to resonate with the core brand values and the core persona and the charisma within which that brand's been built. It needs to resonate throughout, from the person at the top, through their team, all the way through the community as well. Now, when you talk about information's a tricky one, because people don't buy the information. They buy not having to go through and find the information themselves, and having the confidence that the information they're going to be then implementing their time onto is the right information for them. So they're not buying the information, they're buying trust that the information is the right information for them, and it's going to get them the outcome that they want. So they're buying transformation, they're not buying information. And many people, you'll see this in some influencers as well, depending on the messaging, where you see messaging around, how this makes you feel. Actually, you're not buying the transformation even, you're buying the confidence to implement. In many cases, the people actually know the information already. They're just getting confirmed the information they know is accurate, but then they're buying the confidence within which to implement. So in essence, they're buying the mindset shift from point A to point B. That's why in many cases it's a high ticket sell, not because the information is high value, because often it's not. You can find the same stuff on YouTube in 2 minutes flat. But the transformation of mindset has massive, massive potential. And that's the thing, that's the value that you get. I'm not quite sure if that answers the question, or if I'm just ranting at this point. Do you believe that you need to love what you're doing in order to be able to make it a success? Answer to you. Do you think you can do what you're doing, if this is you that you're talking about, or just asking for a friend? If you look at what you're doing and you have to do it every single day, day in, day out, for between 3 to 5 years, bare minimum, if not 10, will you look at yourself in 3 to 5 years' time or 10 years' time and think, I fucking hated that. That was horrible, and I never want to do it again? You're in many ways, you're almost building a relationship here. So if I looked at my wife before we got married and thought, oh, fucking hell, the thought of waking up next to that for the next 3 to 5 years, Jesus, nah, I'm good, thanks. Do you think I would have proposed? I wouldn't have done. I wouldn't have had 2 children with her. It's a relationship you're building here. So yes, I do believe that you if you don't love what you do, you need to have a passion for what you do, at the bare minimum, because it's really key that you can be able to get yourself out of bed on the mornings where you don't want to get out of bed, because you still want to, or feel you need to, or you have a passion for your commitments, because this is a commitment at the end of the day. So I hope that answers that question. Would love to hear your views on whether you think franchising is an effective method of scaling a business when it comes to being a service provider as opposed to I've actually worked for a few franchise businesses. What I will tell you about franchise businesses, especially ones that scale, is that yes, you can scale franchise businesses for sure. And if you do it right, you can scale them massively. However, and there's a big but here, where I have seen every single franchise business struggle, without exception, every single one of them, including the 3 that I worked for myself directly, or worked for or with as a consultant, because 2 of them were consultants gigs. Every one of them had problems with the franchisees themselves. So when you create a franchise business, you need to be very, very clear and almost to the point of being militant with how you manage the franchisee network. And I mean, part of what I go through with my own clients, like I said, with the business of you, is setting core values and beliefs, barriers, things that you will and will not accept. That is critically important with franchise businesses, because what ends up happening is that all these mindset shifts that I've been talking about today, the franchisor and the franchisor's team will go through the same thing. And you can expand and you can scale in terms of people. You'd have to be very careful about how you structure your hierarchy, because like I said, when you look at the lines of communication, when you get to about teams of 5 to 6 people, it actually becomes almost impossible to manage a team bigger than that with any level of effectiveness. So when you get to say 5 people, the 5th or the 6th one, bare maximum, the 6th one needs to become a team leader or a team manager, for example. And you have 5 team leads or team managers to 1 manager above them, and so on. Okay, because lines of communication becomes really difficult to manage teams of bigger than 5. So when I'm on boards of teams, if that board has more than 5 people in it, the leadership structure of that board is fundamentally flawed, because you're unable to manage that business, right, with any level of effectiveness. So when you're talking about franchisees, look at franchisees as teams within their own right, or team structures within their own right. So if you try and have franchisees that are, say, more than 5 franchisees that are managed by 1 regional manager, you're going to struggle. And then when you start struggling is when the franchisees then start getting an element of almost independence, a bit of resentment, a bit of like, well, why am I paying my management service fee to these people over here when actually I can do it myself? And they start thinking of themselves and believing of themselves as like sharks in a pond, when actually they're just tiny little fish in your ocean, right? And when that happens, it is very, very easy for you to have a massive revolt on your hands. So like I said, it becomes very, very, very critical to manage them in a very tight way and put very clear, distinctive borders of what you'll basically deliver, for how much, what you'll accept from them and what you won't, and so on. So I hope that answers that question. So yes, you can scale for sure, but you have to be very careful how you do it. Got to go, Alex. Goodbye. Nice to see you here. Linger's on mute.
Alex had another question a while ago, and
I missed that one.
Was with the exposure you have of different founders, what would you say is the biggest mental barrier they have to overcome before they're ready for the growth phase?
Clear separation of roles and responsibilities is probably the biggest. And the next one, well, actually the foundation one to that would be, if you have 2 co-founders of a business that fundamentally on core issues have a disagreement or if they are on two different sides of that issue, then you basically have the breeding ground for toxicity before you even begin. So when that happens, often I would actually suggest finding a different founding partner, because, like I said, when everything's amplified, it's amplified like a lot. So if you've got these fundamental issues that are potentially dangerous issues at the beginning, they're going to get 1,000 times worse as you start going more. And I say fundamental issues, there's actually a pair of founders that I worked with a couple of years ago now, actually, that they didn't have fundamental issues, but when they were working with me on their product, it was actually really funny. They were making a new type of remote controlled vibrator for women, obviously, which I think they've done really well during COVID, because they were originally doing it for, say, couples who traveled for work, for example, people who are overseas a lot, military couples and so on, and they're aiming it at that, so you can remotely access via an app a vibrator. So you can imagine the fun you could have with marketing that kind of a product. But when I was talking to them about values and beliefs and how that resonated within the product, on a core level, they believed in female empowerment and believed in the empowerment that believing and accepting your sexuality can give you. They believe in open relationships, with not open relationships as in open relationships, but open relationships as in within the couple, just openness as a couple. And on all of that, they completely agreed. But the funny thing is, when we were talking about the product, I can't remember what I said now about it, but I was asking a bunch of questions about values and beliefs and how it resonated through the product itself. And one of them said, battery life's the most important thing, for sure. And they just almost carried on talking. And then the other one said, no. It's the intensity of the motor. That's the most important thing. And they were like, well, what do you mean? And we spent an hour talking about their really strong beliefs between intensity and duration of orgasm, which for me, sat in a coffee shop, obviously the most hilarious conversation I've had for a long time. But when you really dig into the beliefs of the business, but also the product, you'll be surprised often what comes out of those conversations. And they eventually had to agree. They actually agreed to meet in the middle. I think they were going to do a baseline version, which focused on battery life, and an intense version, which focused on intensity of motor. So serving both worlds. And that was like in their roadmap. And they were like, yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, that's how that materialized. And that all started through conversations about value and belief.
Yeah. I had some other questions, but right now I think this is the highlight of the night, and I think this is the perfect way of how you finish, because with you I always get into something very unexpected, be it conversations on Clubhouse or things like learning
orgasms.
How to decide what is more important in orgasm. So I'm quite glad that this was an evening session.
I have to repurpose this video. It's going to be hilarious.
Then let us know in the comments.
So here's a question for you all. Intensity or duration? Let us know in the comments. What do you reckon? No one's brave enough.
This was fantastic. I'm curious to see if someone will say something or not. But
it'll come on a replay. Oh, it'll come on a replay. I didn't even mean to say that, but it's even funnier that it's just come out.
But I will just wrap this up. This was a fantastic session, really mind-blowing. As I said, I'm sure that not only myself, but lots of the people who have been here will be rewatching it. Someone said duration, so, first vote.
Okay.
And
good to know.
If
a marathon, not a sprint.
Please let us know duration or intensity. This is the important question of the night.
Yes. Marathon or sprint?
Yeah.
Intensity, duration. You pick.
And
We won't
make
judge.
sure to follow Dan on where is the best place to follow you and learn more from you.
Any social platform at Dan Holloway Live is me. So feel free. I've actually got a really fun thing I'm launching soon. So give us a follow and I will let you know about that as it arrives. All the new Indigos are coming out now.
Super exciting. Awesome. Thank you so much for this lovely evening. Thank you everyone for watching and staying this late with us. And if you have any further questions that you came up with later or you want to discuss privately, just make sure to hit Dan up because he's always happy to chat. So awesome. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
All right. Thanks.